to everyone who is listening. Big thanks to Dinesh Mathur sir for considering me good enough to present my views on a disease on a national platform like this. Uh, Thanks to US Agrawal sir for the liberal introduction that I got, and Lalit sir for the uh, warm welcome. Yes, now I am a local of Rajasthan, and I am proud to be part of this family. Uh, I have chosen a topic which is close to my heart to talk to you all, and this is about alopecia areata, a very common disease. The past, present, and future is as how I would put it. I have no relevant conflicts of interest to disclose. When Mathur sir and I had a talk, this was even I think prior to the conference that we had, and he said, "Ki you should be talking about something." I said, "Ki sir, okay, whenever I find time and I have matter enough to discuss, I will definitely like to talk about alopecia areata." तो एक पुरानी पिक्चर है, वैसे पुराना बोलना खतरनाक है, मैं उम्र पे कोई कमेंट नहीं कर रहा, बट कल आज और कल करके एक पिक्चर होती थी सर, आजकल तो लव आजकल चलती है, तो एलोपेशिया एरियाटा का भी एक कल था, एक आज है और एक आने वाला कल है जिसपे हाईलाइट है काफी. In my presentation from here on, try to talk about the facets to this very interesting disease. Well, understanding alopecia areata is not very difficult. Well, it's a downward swing when it starts. It's a immune-mediated cause of hair loss, which affects a wide variety of people. When we teach alopecia to our undergraduate students, we tell, well, you divide it into two, scarring and non-scarring. And if you're looking at non-scarring, which generally has a good prognosis, then you can do something about it. There are two common diseases, and one of them is alopecia areata, the other being androgenic alopecia. But coming back to alopecia areata, we understand this is organ-restricted autoimmune disease, and lymphocytes play a key role. It is asymptomatic, and there are a number of classifications. One which divides it into simply three: patchy alopecia totalis and universalis, while there are classifications which further divide it into patchy and diffuse alopecia areata reticularis, ophiacis, Cisifio, and perinevoid alopecia areata. The extent of involvement is arguably the most important prognostic factor in alopecia areata. And the problem is not with people who come with limited disease. The problem, unfortunately, is with people who come with severe disease, where the chance of full recovery is less than 10%. Well, we all know how it looks like. You can have a single patch, you can have two patches. You can have the reticular pattern and with the typical exclamation mark here that you can see. And then at the other end of the spectrum are cases which are absolutely bereft of any form of hair, the totalis and the universalis variant. I was just going into the past, the cull of alopecia areata, and I realized the cull was very colorful. I mean, the descriptions rate as long back as 1500 BCE in the Ebers papyrus, where the first reference comes. And there are Chinese references, Arab references, Indian references at the same time. But a lot of theories which thereafter got disproven one by one. Interestingly, around 1958, the hypothesis surrounding autoantibodies or autoimmunity comes into the picture. The famed Aikida classification comes at around 1965. And in 1971, the important concept of immune privilege was highlighted by Willingham and Silvers. This publication also highlights that thereon interferon alpha and other things came prominently into picture. Late 1970s onwards, 90s onward, there was a lot of light thrown into the aspect of autoimmunity. But if I'm supposed to highlight, I would rather highlight the year 2010, when two important studies came into being. One by Kang and colleague, who highlighted the immune privilege loss in alopecia areata. And Petukova et al. In fact, अगर आप देखें तो Petukova et al. का नेचर में आर्टिकल है और उनके साथ एक बहुत बड़ा नाम है alopecia areata से रिलेटेड, उनका नाम है डॉक्टर एंजेला क्रिस्टियानो, जो आप if one searches for this name and looks for matter published on alopecia areata, this group at Columbia University in the US have done the maximum work. So what came importantly at that point of time in the age of alopecia areata was the genome-wide association studies. There was interestingly one time when it was believed that probably alopecia areata is very close to psoriasis. And the genome-wide association studies interestingly have put into picture first 8 loci and now around 16, which kind of makes alopecia areata a close cousin of rheumatoid arthritis and type 1 diabetes. Why is that relevant? I will talk in a while. So there was a historical aspect. I will again repeat the same. At one point of time, people thought it was infectious theory, some infection leading to alopecia areata, which is partly true. At times, it is believed that there are triggers to alopecia, and some triggers are infectious, probably viral in nature. Then there was a long time when fungal infections were mistaken for alopecia areata. Then there was a wide belief that some parasite, including Borla. Then there was a time when experimentally in cats, this disease was induced by nerve severing, and it was believed that some nerve atrophy causes it. Some dystrophy theory too came into being, and then finally settled all to the autoimmune theory, which currently holds vogue and is considered the most impressive in terms of evidence available for alopecia areata. Why I said 2010 is again, this is a slide courtesy National Alopecia Areata Foundation. As you can see, the histopath, which all PGs would be knowing, that there is something called a swarm of bees, lots of lymphocytes surrounding the hair bulb. And from 2010 onwards, with the advent of immunohistochemistry, people have realized that there is something called as ULBP3, which is a death ligand, and there are specific cells in the T lymphocyte category called the and the natural killer cells, which kind of combine to give the picture of alopecia areata. So this is what is has drastically changed in the understanding about disease in the 21st century. The loci that I was talking about, well, I have named 7, but as time passes by, these studies are putting it the count to the higher side. It is definitely a genetic disease. But I will again highlight an interesting thing which I came across while undergoing literature, and they say that if you have identical twins and one of them has alopecia areata, since the other inherits the same genes, the chance of the other patient developing it is 50%, even despite the fact that it is identical twin that we are talking about. It is believed that environment, by virtue of stress and other factors, plays an equally important role in the genesis of alopecia areata. And these environmental triggers, as I said, is not limited to stress. There are hormones, then there are viral agents, then there are vaccines. I suspect with the COVID vaccine or the COVID infection, we might see an upsurge, although I will confess that is not what we note here at AIIMS Jodhpur. Then there are beliefs that low serum zinc and selenium levels cause it. Some people incriminate allergy as environmental trigger of inducing these changes, but the fact remains genetics has an important say in alopecia areata, but the triggers can be many, and it's not a left-hand side is equal to right-hand side mathematical equation in the disease. This is a publication which came in the British Journal of Dermatology, which will help me highlight something. Now, this is the normal hair follicle as we envisage, and there is a physical barrier. This immune privilege is just like the central nervous system. It won't allow the immunity to hit the hair, normally speaking. There is absence of lymphatic drainage. There is presence of an extracellular matrix preventing entry into the hair follicle. In addition to that, there is inhibition of the natural killer cells by virtue of no expression of MHC class 1 molecules, down regulation of certain death ligands, direct inhibition of natural killer cells. low expression of NKG2D lymphocytes, and high expression of inhibitory KIR receptors. Then there is some antigen sequestration, यानी जो death ligands हैं उनको छुपा के रखा जाता है. And there are certain immune guardians. I will again re-emphasize them in a different publication slide that I have, which prevent the exposure of antigen-associated melanocyte, melanogenesis-associated antigen, which is still to be discovered, to be exposed to immune cells, and therefore the disease doesn't start. But once the immune privilege breaks down, and why does it break down is still an enigma. All of this comes cascading downwards. Stress comes in, the regulatory T cells lose their regulation, the CD8 plus positive cells enter into the picture. There is a lot of cytokine signature. Interferon gamma and interleukin 15 will play an important role. I will highlight that again in a different slide altogether. But the point remains to underline that alopecia areata is in the present quite convincingly in animal models proven to be an immune privilege breakdown. That same publication talks about another aspect to alopecia areata, which highlights the role of the brain, the neuroendocrine axis, and the mast cell. It talks about a feedback loop, which again includes a different set of cytokines and histamine, which are considered important in triggering alopecia areata. So there is a lot going around in the research, and which keeps on throwing newer and newer evidences, but all evidences in favor of autoimmunity. This is the article which was published in Nature in September 2014, and in fact is an interesting gist. It's a very good diagram which will help me to explain what I was talking about. So this is the pre-disease phase, or you can say the cusp of the disease starting, where the hair follicle bulb is in the anagen phase and the melanocyte or the melanogenesis associated antigen is still just about hidden when something provokes the CD8 positive natural killer T cells to enter in. Now, if we look at this focus as to what is going around, you will notice that, okay, this is the divide and this is the follicular epithelial cell on one side, while this is the natural, the CD8 positive cell on the other side. This is the death ligand which comes up, and there is a corresponding receptor present on the lymphocyte, and an MSC class 1 and T cell receptor combination that occurs. Once this docking takes place, a lot of interferon gamma is released by the CD8 positive cell. This interferon gamma talks through something called as the JAK-STAT pathway, JAK for Janus kinase, and this JAK-STAT pathway goes on to the nucleus and starts the production of interleukin 15 and its chaperone protein interleukin 15 R alpha, which hits the JAK-STAT pathway of the CD8 cell and kind of creates, as you see, a vicious loop where a lot of interferon and a lot of interleukin 15 keeps on looping around, and a lot of T cells become attracted to this area. There is that swarming of bees and conversion of an anagen follicle into a telogen follicle and a subsequent hair loss. This slide will actually help me. This publication was much more simpler to understand. And again, as I told in a previous slide, there are certain immune privileged guardians like alpha MSH, transformation growth factor beta 1, insulin-like growth factor 1, which kind of prevents the entry of these autoimmunity regulators. But this loss of immune privilege occurs. A lot of interferon gamma comes into the picture. There is insufficient regulatory activity, and the inflammatory, the autoimmunity cells interact with the death ligand and start secondary autoimmune events, activate not only the CD8 positive cells, but the CD4 positive cells too. There are certain autoantibodies, and thus begins the picture of autoimmunity causing hair loss. Slightly differ from this entire talk regarding the immunity portion and talk about the management protocols. Well, there are a number of protocols which are, say, laid down by Journal of American Academy of Dermatology, and in the same year in the Clinical Review of Allergy and Immunology. Both are pretty much similar, Because at the end of the day, understanding the pathology is not where it all ends. We must look for therapy too. And we understand the mainstay of therapy is the topical corticosteroid, or rather the intralesional corticosteroid. But if you have a patient who is young, both of the flow charts talk about the children less than 10 years, although we have seen children or adults, even like us, who are very worried of the jab that we are getting for COVID. So are a number of patients who actually decline, please don't give me an injection. So all is fine till the scalp involvement is less than 50%. But once it goes beyond, that is where the problem lies. There are a plethora of options, but none of them is definitively sure of helping. And both of these publications do highlight the fact that therapies now may include a DPCP and a JAK-STAT inhibitor and a number of newer agents which have come up gradually in the past 10 years. So again, if you have a hair loss less than 50%, you can offer a patient topical corticosteroid. Most often in private practice or in routine practice, we offer an intralesional corticosteroid, maybe mix up a little bit of topical minoxidil. Once it goes beyond 50%, systemic corticosteroids need to be given, or immunosuppressives like cyclosporine, methotrexate, and azathioprine. There is this attractive topical immunotherapy, including diphencyprine and squaric acid of dibutyl ester, SADB. And now the stress or the new kid on the block, which includes tofacitinib, which is now widely available, quite cheap in India. But still, intralesional steroid is the mainstay, which I think 90% of us would be giving. The commonly advised dose differs from individual to individual, and the gap between the two injections also differ. What we generally prefer is a 5 milligram per ml shot, and we schedule it anywhere between 3 to 6 weeks. And interestingly, we're trying to look for references, and a number of surprises cropped up. Surprise one, none of the treatment in alopecia areata is FDA approved. Surprise two, although we give it routinely, there is no study to kind of underline that what is the best strength to be offered to the patient. So therefore, we carried out a thesis which ended up in a publication in Dermatologic Therapy. This was one of our first PGs, and we are proud to have this publication. And we did a very novel thing. In this study, we recruited patients where we chose patches and divided them into 4 quadrants. Each quadrant was offered randomized treatment by triamcinolone acetonide injection in 10 milligram per ml, 5 milligram per ml, 2.5 milligram per ml, and a control of normal saline. Which quadrant was getting what, we randomized to avoid kind of bias of what was being offered. As you can see, we were calling the patient every 4 weeks. We did the dermoscopic analysis, and we had a few results to share. We realized that although if we look at in terms of response to the treatment, the 10 milligram per ml group offers the best response, but it also offers a lot of adverse effects. So we have proposed that by virtue of statistical analysis, that it won't be a bad idea of disease, limited disease, which can be self-limiting, to start with low concentration as low as 2.5 and maybe upgrade the concentration thereafter depending upon the response that you get. These are the linear graphs where again, if you look at graph A, which are quadrant with poor clinical response, we can see how the poor clinical response is least in the group which was offered 10 milligram per ml. If you look at dermoscopic disease activity signs, we find, although interestingly, that it is very closely followed by the 5 milligram per ml group. And if you look at atrophy, look at the sheer length at which triamcinolone acetonide at 10 milligram per ml causes atrophy and other side effects. So we basically kind of conclude that the safest and the best in terms of response would be the strength of 5 milligram per ml triamcinolone acetonide intralesionally. But again, coming back to the clinical spectrum, this is not the case which I would give an intralesional. I hope we all understand that. How many injections will this end up into? So this is a case which is fit to have other forms of therapy. The other forms of therapy brings us back to what I was talking when I was talking about the genome-wide association studies done by Dr. Angela Cristiano group at Columbia. And this paper came up in the Journal of Investigative Dermatology in the same year, in fact, prior to the Nature publication. And interestingly, this patient suffered from two diseases, psoriasis and alopecia areata universalis. And Craiglow and King decided to try tofacitinib, believing that this drug, which is being proposed to be used in rheumatoid arthritis and maybe of some use in psoriasis, maybe of some help in alopecia areata too. And lo and behold, after 8 months of treatment, the patient had the complete mane. And in the publication, both Craiglow and King conclude that this new small molecule is a very exciting era to try. And in fact, somewhere deep down in the publication, they do mention that despite the fact that his psoriasis didn't exactly go away, but he was so happy with the hair that he got back that he kind of continued with the treatment. So killing two birds with one stone. Coming back to the same slide, what does it do? The same slide, I failed to highlight these two squares. These two squares are being highlighted for the benefit that this JAK-STAT pathway can be controlled by JAK-STAT inhibitors. And in India, we have tofacitinib now easily available. In the West, there are a couple of, in fact, more. If you look at study-wise, there are a number of JAK-STAT inhibitors. And as we can understand, if something hits this loop, either at one spot or the other two, this vicious cycle which creates the swarm of bees of lymphocytes kinds of breaks down, and the patient can have relief from the disease per se. This was the group that I was talking about. You can see this name, you can type it in the PubMed, and you can visualize. They have done a lot of work, and Nature publication said that alopecia areata is driven by cytotoxic T lymphocytes and is reversed by JAK inhibition. So a lot of buzz was going around, and it's still 7 years back. In fact, now there is Indian evidence also, and even that evidence is 3 years dated. This was done by Dr. B.S. Chandrasekhar at the QTIS in Bengaluru, and it was published in the International Journal of Psychology. Pardon. And look at the impressive results that he had to share. This group had to share. They have put up, in fact, this patient details. This is the case series of patients. We all know such patients. We have seen them in our PG. We have struggled with them. I recollect times when we offered dexamethasone pulse with very little response. And the same previous detailed treatment, the oral steroids, the cyclosporins, the azathioprines, the pulse therapy, and then this shift or trial to TOFA with impressive response. So we had this patient, and I asked the patient, you have come to us with no hair. I need a photograph as a record of what you had. And then this is what she shared when she was a school-going kid. And as you can see, a lot of hair till then. This is her WhatsApp photo status, but her present-day reality is a bit like this. As we know, alopecia areata universalis will not have hair. Don't be fooled by the eyebrows that you are seeing. These are all kajal induced. We know patients do that. We understand for some odd reason females may predominate here, and just to go into the psyche of these patients in marriageable age with no hair, I mean, how bad it would feel is something I think we all can empathize. She used to come to the OPD with this hairpiece, and in fact, it had become a reality. And again, having the feel of this hairpiece, I mean, it's easier to wear a cap than this. So, although we went through the conventional route, we gave oral mini pulse for months together. We had some response and then lack of response. We tried the combination of statin and ezetimibe, which is in fact given in a few trials. There are case reports of effect, but for 5 months, even in combination of this steroid, it didn't help. We tried the DPCP regime for 9 months, it didn't help. So we had to take the plunge. I'm not, as I said, I have no conflicts of interest, and nobody came to promote this drug, but to my utter surprise, it was available in the Indian market. It was available here at Jodhpur. I said, well, you can take this if you want. why I have put the two figures, just notice the MRP which the company puts up, it reads 66,344 for a bottle of 60 as far as I know. But look at the receipt that she used to get. She used to get it at half the price. So although the price has come crashing down, we know at least two more firms, Indian firms, which have introduced this drug in the Indian market. But at that point of time, back 2 years back, this is what we had and this is what we gave to the patient. The recovery, well, was slow. Asit sir, if he's there in the audience, he had actually told me once, please refrain from trying drugs, but what could I have done? The patient was not getting any response and I was pretty desperate to try something. I introduced the side effects to the patient and started the drug. The recovery did start as I think the audience would notice, somehow the eyebrows recovered first. And gradually, after 3 months, there was visible recovery. The close-ups will emphasize. But I will go back to the same International Journal of Trichology, because there is this case series follow-up and side effect column. Although it doesn't, why does it feature is something that we should appreciate. We all understand that whenever we talk about dramatic improvement, we are very happy, because for diseases which are there for 10 years and 15 years, having dramatic improvement is a big thing to have. But side effect is something that we need to be wary of. And in fact, prior to this seminar, I was confessing this and I have presented that case elsewhere too. Unfortunately, after 3 months of therapy, the patient landed up in the emergency one night with severe abdominal ache. And when she was investigated, it was she was found to have a bone marrow suppression of significant degree. And the physician said, please stop your drug. The patient came, thanked us thankfully, and said, I have had decent response and I'm happy that off steroids I'm getting a response for the first time, but I won't be able to continue because I'm a bit terrified with the side effect that I had. So if you read TOFA, that bottle of Zelzange contains a very long patient information leaflet. It talks about serious infection. It talks about diarrhea. It talks about nasopharyngitis as a very common side effect. URTI, same thing, headache, hypertension, a whole lot of side effects, including abdominal pain, as you could see. In fact, it is known to cause peritonitis, and we learned it the hard way. We had to stop the drug. But that still doesn't take away anything from what has been done at the Columbia University Medical Center from 2001 onwards. Mind you, there are translational studies. They have proven it in mice too, that the drug does work. In fact, the application has gone on to introduce the topical tofacitinib, understanding that systemic may have some side effects. But in this entire line diagram showing various timelines, there is somewhere conceded that the topical doesn't work that well. Maybe in the near future, I believe that there would be a drug which might be given intralegionally and which will not be a steroid, which might be of some help. That would be the cull of the future, sir, which I was trying to allude to. The same, now this is British Journal of Dermatology 2018, and this talks about the newer treatment options in alopecia areata, and there are a number of them. As I told, there's a lot going around in terms of research in the immune pathways and contact sensitizers, the neuroendocrine axis I was alluding to, co-stimulation blockers, regulatory T cell blockers, NK cell specific blockers, T cell blockers, and cytokine inhibitors. All are there being tried in different studies in different stages where they have offered enough relief to patients with alopecia areata. And I'm here talking about, in general, patients who suffer from severe disease, high SALT scores. In fact, this is a publication, again, I will underline Angela Cristiano's group, and they have tried abatacept with impressive response. It is available in India. It is prohibitively costly. I will not go into the dosing because at present one dose I think costs somewhere around 25,000 rupees. I don't think it is affordable still. But there are still interesting options. And there are at least two publications, one dealing with, both the publications deal with patients who had some abdominal trouble. One, I think, had a malignancy where they tried fecal transplant, and one where there was Clostridium difficile infection where they tried fecal transplant. Both the patients had some or the other alopecia areata. In fact, in the Clostridium difficile case report, it was attuned almost pretty severe alopecia areata, which has recovered and has remained recovered with a fairly benign treatment. And this is a newer option which I should not be omitting at this point of time. But we all understand people who lose hair unfortunately become the butt of ridicule. This is a movie which came a couple of years back, which was hugely successful. And both these movies deal with androgenic alopecia. I know I'm talking about alopecia areata. This one dealt with alopecia areata. And although the butt of ridicule is well understood, the comic factor isn't understood, but females with alopecia areata, totalis or universalis, need to be empathized with. So do the males. And the search should go on. We have a patient, even during COVID times, somebody who consulted us, sir, I have a hair loss for 3 months. We went conventional, we tried cyclosporin. There was some data that cyclosporin even helps. COVID won't give any nuksan, but it didn't quite help the patient, as you can see. In the physical OPD, though, we have now shifted to oral mini-pulse. There is response, and from the last week onwards, again, I am taking the plunge with my fingers crossed. I've told the patient of all the possible side effects. I know it breaks their heart, but I mean, it breaks their heart even otherwise. Having no hair, you can, the moment I used to ask these patients, "Aap mujhe pareshani bataiye," because at the gut level, you feel it's at the end of the day hair only. But for females, hair is, I mean, in this day and age, a very close attachment. You can see a drop of tear in their eyes, and then you are forced to maybe try it for a second time. I've tried it now at much lesser dose. I'm giving it at a 5 mg on alternate night. I'll keep a close eye on the side effect profile and maybe report to you at some other forum as to what happens thereafter, because I can't continue our oral steroid beyond a point, which I think we should all concede. Sobering thought. Now, this is a publication which says that the current treatment modalities, and it includes the JAK-STAT inhibitors, do not seem to influence the long-term outcome. Because this is a valid question to ask that, Doctor, for how long is the treatment supposed to be taken? And therein, there lies no answer. The fact remains, the moment you stop treatment, especially in the cases which are severe, there is a lashback. The patient kind of reverts back to the original disease state. So in summary, besides what you choose, whether you choose intralesional steroid or whether you choose your systemic corticosteroid or oral mini-pulse, or you choose cyclosporin, which are all attractive options. I have little experience with methotrexate, but I've tried cyclosporin. But you should offer certain things which are there. There is a close correlate with gut microbiota, and therefore offering your patient, asking the patient to take less oxidative diets, which are inclusive of all burgers and colas. You can ask them to go slow on that. You can ask them to take a lot of probiotics and fresh vegetables. This is what I ask my patient to do. Reducing stress would be helpful, as we understand immunity and stress are very closely correlated. Sleep adequately. Sleep is associated with stress. Again, don't smoke. Beware of antibiotics. As I said, the gut microbiota has some correlate, and giving antibiotics without pre and probiotics, I think that's a practice we should all avoid, even for dermatological infections. And fecal transplant maybe in the future. The kind of responses that a few case reports have shown, it might have some role to play. That is the cull of alopecia areata. Well, in these times of COVID, I've taken this from the New Yorker. It's hard to stay afloat. Hope and exhaustion in the coronavirus fight. I think we all will know everything was coming down. Then the listener told me, "यार तेरे शहर में तो धारा 144 लग गई है. महाराष्ट्र का हाल हम सब जानते हैं, केरला का क्या हाल है." तो alopecia areata में भी ऐसा ही कुछ है. But hope floats. Hope is what actually keeps us afloat. I will request all the viewers to keep the hope thing on. Keep a close watch. The West is doing a lot. a number of things might come up. Some of them would be cheap. I'd like to thank you for giving me attention on this talk of mine. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much, Dr. Abhishek. It was indeed a very nice presentation, and we learned a lot these things. And JAK-STAT inhibitors starting from almost 66,000 rupees. Now they have come to be very less, almost
Yes.
50 rupees a tablet for that. And I tried in after making some local applications, but still nothing much has been approved. I do not know whether how much it is available in topical preparations in outside the country.
Not in India, sir. I think they are trial status in the West only.
Right.
But considering the side effect, therefore I considered maybe in the future we'll have a cream in
But
the market.
you had a very severe side effect in that patient. So, but even when I tried to make topical, so it was hardly 5 grams, even less than that. That was costing almost 60 or 80 tablets. So that was also 1,500 rupees, something kind of that. So
Yes.
not very
Not cheap by any standards.
not value for money until unless you grow the hair. Otherwise, you can on Amazon you can get a wig in 1,000 rupees or something like that. Right. So thank you very much once again, Dr. Lalit. Can you please take the questions, please?
So thank you very much, Abhishek, for your wonderful